Welcome back to One on One here on WFUV Sports, New York's longest running call-in show. I'm Miles Grossman alongside Will DeFusco. This evening, we're so happy to be joined by Eric Newman of Showtime Sports. Eric has a new documentary drop this past week. Kevin Garnett, Anything is Possible, available on Showtime Sports and their streaming platforms. Eric, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know how busy of a guy you must be these days. It really means a lot for us to have this time with you.
No, pleasure, fellas. Pleasure. Good to be here with you. Good to be here. Appreciate it. I noticed that Boston sports poster in the back. Okay, we got that back there. I see it. Nice. Yeah. Rob, you on campus right now? You at Fordham?
We both sure are on Fordham. Yes, sir. Just part of WFUV Sports. It's a great program here. We're both happy to be a part of it. Eric, first of all, congratulations on your new project. Was this a project that began before COVID-19 and then was kind of postponed by those issues, or was this something that was born during the pandemic?
So this was, personally, this is something that both myself and executive producer Brian Daly of Showtime, had wanted to do for a very long time. But in terms of bringing it to life, Mark Levin, executive producer from Blowback Productions, and my co-director, Dan Levin, his son, who have been friends and colleagues of mine for 10 years. Mark had met KG in 2018. So it was after he retired. He was figuring out what he wanted to do. Mark was out in LA. They met. The seed was planted. And 2018, 2019, I was doing the DeMarcus Cousins resurgence film with Showtime, which was a big step forward in my career. And Mark connected me with KG's team, and we actually got in the room together in LA when we were filming Boogie's return, when he had that great return for the Warriors at Staples against the Clippers. And right away, there was that synergy, there was that passion. Obviously, we know what KG's passion is, and in no way am I comparing myself to him, but I am that amped and that passionate when it comes to basketball and storytelling. And they had a vision for something they wanted to do. We obviously wanted to listen to that. We wanted to combine ideas, combine forces. Took 2019 to flush it out, do the creative development, do the pitch meetings. It didn't take much of a pitch. It was more so just honing in on so many different things, because as confident as KG was as a player and is as a person, he's extremely humble. So at first he was like, I want to tell the story of the impact. And, he was terming it like the butterfly effect, where I always use the domino effect of what his decision in 95 to go from high school to the pros was. And I'm like, that's genius. Let's combine that with your story. And he kind of needed to take a step back and think about it. But at the end, it made sense. But all of 2019 was laying it out, right? From everything from budget to game plans to target voices. And then you fast forward into 2020, and it's pretty surreal when you think about it. We only had 4 shoot days before the pandemic shut everything down in early March. The first 2 shoot days were in LA on January 24th and 25th, the 2 days before the Kobe tragedy. And the day before the Kobe tragedy, and you guys have seen the film, those beautiful beach scenics were shot in Malibu, 10 miles from where the Kobe tragedy happened the day before. And it's just really crazy to think about because of their connection and their lineage, and the fact that, I'm lucky enough to be the executive producer of Showtime Basketball, right? So a month before, I'm at Kobe's office capturing his epic All the Smoke episode and telling his people, hey, this is what we're doing. We'd love to have Kobe involved. They were like, oh, absolutely. We'll figure out a scene. We'll do it. And then that took place. And that just made us all really pause and think about a lot of things. I call it the last day of normalcy. Nothing's really felt right since then, even though we seem to be getting on the other side of things right now. But still nothing feels normal to me since then. And then we had 2 shoot days in Chicago for 2020 All-Star. One of them was the All the Smoke show with KG, which was an epic episode. And that day he also had his Hall of Fame finalist press conference. And then the next day, which was President's Day Monday, which I think is the most pivotal shoot of the film, is his visit back to Farragut. Because if we don't get it that day, you're not getting access to a school during a pandemic. And we did it on the Monday of President's Day when nobody was there. Yeah. So who knows if we even have a film? I got to be honest. Like, yeah, we would have had all this great stuff, but without the Farragut piece, We definitely don't have what we have. So it was a 3-month hiatus after that. And then we picked it up again in June. Like Dan Levin, my co-director, and I came out to LA, knocked out 8 or 9 interviews in 4 or 5 weeks. And then we were able to start cutting and continuing to film as we went. And it was literally going from this grand plan we thought we had to month by month filmmaking is essentially what it was. Here's what we're trying to accomplish this month on the edit side. Here's what we're trying to, accomplish this month on interviews and outreach. And that was the cadence. So very fortunate we were able to figure it out as we went. There's no playbook for this, right? Like, have you guys made a film during a pandemic before? I haven't. So yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of mentioned that KG's kind of a humble guy, and so in order to get the most out of this documentary, I'm sure you had to get to know him a bit. And so, how do you find out more about his life, like more than what met the eye?
Well, there became a point in 2019 where he just, he started to trust. He saw what we were doing. He saw how we were communicating with him. He saw our passion for it. The Levins and Blowback Productions, who have been part of my life for 10 years, and Mark Levin's been a mentor to me. I don't know if you guys saw the film that I worked on with Dan Levin. Mark was a consultant. It was called The Legend of Sweet Pea, about the great Lloyd Daniels from New York, the great playground legend. So we had that great connection, and you combine that with Showtime's track record and, Brian Daly, executive producer of the film, SVP at Showtime Sports, and the president of Showtime Sports, Stephen Espinoza. Him and KG have this great story where KG is on Brooklyn and they're going to China, and somehow Stephen Espinoza ends up on that flight. It was like an exhibition, and they're up 4 or 5 hours talking boxing. So KG always had this thing for Showtime, and he also has this thing for story, like we all do. I'm a movie nut and a basketball nut at the end of the day. So as all these synergies are aligning, and we're just staying at it, there just became a point where he actually verbalized that at one point, like his trust for myself and Dan and Mark and Brian and everybody. And you got Kevin Garnett saying that out loud. It's a pretty damn good feeling. So from there, there are a lot of things he shared with us about his life, his upbringing that, we just did not put in the film because some of those things are not for public. They're just for us to know, but they also help guide us as storytellers. And they help guide us in terms of, okay, we can push a little bit here, bring back a little bit here, but it's it's hard to compare it to any other experience I've had working with any athlete. I've been very fortunate with what I've been able to do. And, I started as a 21-year-old intern going to the Garden. I grew up in Long Island. I started going to the Garden and putting a mic in people's face, and going to the Jets training camp and being too scared to ask Bill Parcells a question. And just for you guys being at Fordham, which I know is a very special place in sports broadcasting and sports media, I took an NYU sports broadcasting intensive after I graduated Ithaca in 2000. Originally, I wanted to be a sports broadcaster because sports documentary filmmaking did not exist in this way yet, Mike Breen was one of my professors. Like Mike Breen took an interest in trying to help me develop a career, but I was young, stupid, and impatient. But, thankfully I stuck with my passions and it all worked out. But, building that trust with KG and his team and this entire team of all of us from these different entities with different experiences, really special to come together on this. Really special.
Absolutely. No, I can only imagine what that feels like to build a relationship with a guy like Kevin Garnett. I mean, it's just someone I obviously, for basketball fans, it's just nothing short of an icon in the game. So I can only imagine how spectacular that must have felt.
Yeah.
Obviously,
well, considering I've been a Celtics fan my entire life and grew up in New York around Knicks fans, so that meant 2008 was the ultimate championship. It's hard to put into words what it means. It's still setting in. I got to be honest with you.
I hear you. Yeah, it's genuinely career shifting, and obviously, KG, has this menacing presence on the court. Especially my generation, we've only seen him as this veteran who has this very aggressive, menacing character on the court, and to us young fans, that's all we've that's all we've seen. And it kind of makes fans assume that he has this menacing character about him in all facets of his life. So I'm wondering, did that have anything to do with wanting to tell KG's story, just because of his on-court reputation as this kind of savage?
It's part of it, but it's so much more. Like, you know, when I was I'm 43 years old, guys. So, you know, 3 years after undergrad was when you could buy a MacBook Pro and shoot digital and cut on Final Cut Pro at home, right? So everything I learned old school production wise went out the window at Ithaca. And I go on this, you know, I impatiently leave broadcasting. I'm getting to the answer here, but I impatiently leave broadcasting very early because I'm 23 years old thinking I should be able to get a job in New York, which is just clueless. And I jump into coaching because I was an athlete and I started coaching basketball, you know, as a teenager. So you fast forward to 2008, I'm 30 years old. I'm living a really fun existence in New York. I'm a private school PE teacher. I'm a high school basketball coach. I'm a Nike clinic director. And I'm doing creative on the side, like cool stuff for Dime Magazine and other things like that. And that season on the Celtics, I'm literally watching these games and watching the epic playoff run and dreaming, if I could ever get on that path, this is the guy's story I want to tell, because it was appointment television to watch that team led by him every single night. So it was the passion. It was the talking. It was the leadership. It was the fearlessness. It was the unselfishness. It's all of those things. And to have Ubuntu be part of that culture, which has so much similarity to what Celtic pride means, and growing up reading about Red and reading about Russell and watching Bird and Parrish and McHale and DJ and knowing what that meant, and then to see it in the present day with him at the head of it, along with Pierce and Doc and the rest of the crew, it was something that was like, this is what I want to do one day if I could get there. Yeah. I mean, it literally started then. And then it started to become more of a reality as I started to carve out a career for myself. But, you know, this for me has been both a grind and at times painful, but so exciting and so fulfilling too, because I mean, look where I got to land. I mean, building the Showtime Basketball platform, you know, with the team at Showtime, and being able to create this film in parallel, it's pretty remarkable. So, you know, if you told me right now this was just a great long dream, I would believe you. But I think we're still in reality.
Absolutely. Will, care to
so like a lot of Kevin Garnett's mystique comes from on the court, but were there any aspects of his off the court activity that stood out to you or that impacted the documentary as well?
Off the court during his career or off the court present day?
Both, either.
Well, he's very, very reserved in terms of what his activity is off the court. He chooses to live a quiet life, and I think we can understand why. He's 7 feet tall. He's a public figure. He's been famous since 1995, and people need privacy. You know, it's funny when you build these relationships with people, and obviously he's a global icon, and I'm a filmmaker from New York with a passion. But you know, the things that and it's not just myself, it's colleagues on the film. Some of the commonalities of just consuming the game continuously and consuming content and studying the craft. And that's what really got me, right? Like, you know, a lot of athletes have production companies. They see the benefit of it, not only to tell their stories, to create a business. He studies content and story, whether it's present day docuseries, films, whatever it is. He studies like that stuff like he was studying film back in the day. He studies, he watches, he absorbs. He's got his own tastes, his own opinions on things. And to find someone at that level who could just say to his people, okay, you guys watch all this stuff and then share the notes with me No, he does the work. And, you know, I'll never forget, like, you know, I was the second half of 2019, like, you know, everything sweeping general statement, right? But you guys will learn this when you leave school. Like, in most industries, everything takes longer than it should for some reason, whatever that is. Just things take long to develop, whether it's legal, whether it's paperwork, whether it's getting people aligned, whether it's schedules, whatever it is. So the last half to a third of 2019, you know, we're chipping away, getting everything done. But I'm literally going to bed every night, visualizing, sitting down across from him for that first interview for that first time. Visualizing it. It's like the scene in the film when he's got the trophy in his office. Wake up, look at it. Wake up, look at it. Wake up, look at it. Same thing. And I knew I was prepared because that's what I do. But he was so locked in, and it's not like we went over questions ahead of time. He knew the thematics we were doing that day, but he came in with his own stories, his own remembrances, his own reflections, his own emotions. And to have our prep, our team match what he brought to the table, and him more so match us and so much more. That was just so incredible. Like, first day, looking at my co-director, looking at my director of photography, who's a rock star, knowing how excited our editor was going to be about this stuff, I was just like, how lucky are we? And then from there, and I don't know if you guys were going to ask about this, but I'll throw it out there, and then feel free to ask whatever you want. It's your show, not mine. But like the chorus of voices we got to paint in parallel with his, I'm still astounded by how many incredible voices we were able to get. And there's more we wanted to, but the pandemic is what really messed with that, unfortunately. Some of the opponents that we wanted to get from his era. But you look at those voices, and you look at a lot of docs, right? And you have your subject, your star. And then there's usually, I'm not going to say anyone in these docs is bad, but there's usually like two or three of those voices that really, really, really stand out. In this one, who doesn't stand out? They're all awesome. They're all incredible. And it just goes to show the impact that he had on their life. And whether it was personal life, whether it was experience in the league, whether he was a mentor to them, whether he was junior to them. And then just the emotion that KG brings out in so many people, obviously myself included.
Absolutely. No, and as you mentioned, there's a plethora of NBA stars featured in the new doc from, you know, AI, Paul Pierce, Rondo, Pau Gasol. What has been that? How's that experience been working with those big names? Are there any particular moments that you look back on knowing that you'll never forget that moment that they told you about a particular story?
So I'm spoiled. Like,
yeah,
no, but in my journey, like, you know, I did a lot of stuff behind the scenes for years where I'm working with guys and hearing stories, or people like, oh, you produced that? Oh, you did that interview? It's not like obvious, right? Because in a lot of these productions, you'll have multiple producers doing interviews, and, you know, the director gets the headline and the shine, obviously. I want to say this carefully because I don't want to demean another network or platform, but it's really interesting how Paul Pierce comes across in our film compared to how he was coming across on network television at the four-letter NBA network. Paul is a very thoughtful, insightful, fun-loving guy who is great at telling stories, and his All the Smoke episode is also great. And he really cared. I mean, him and Kevin have this incredible brotherhood. So I knew Paul's interview would be great. Jelani McCoy's interview was so much fun because I was just getting to know him at that point. And obviously that fun story that takes place in the 90s, but also Jelani's ability to just provide insight on the lockout and the hip hop era and all those things. So, you know, him and Barnes I knew would be great. Obviously I have a great working relationship with Matt from the show. Scoop Jackson and Isaiah Thomas were unbelievable. And for me, growing up a Celtics fan and growing up in New York, and, you know, I'm being playful here, but, you know, I love when Knicks fans are going through it. I love when they're being tortured because they tortured me when I was a kid, you know, growing up in Nassau County. Isaiah's interview was so incredible. His insight, his feeling, what he shared about Chicago, what he shared about some of the things that didn't make it into the film, just connecting on what KG really was magnetized by in terms of civil rights and Dr. King and the connections in Chicago and why Bill Russell and him connected so well. Isaiah had incredible things to say, and obviously we see that in the film and see the role he played in his life. And then Scoop's interview, we went 4 hours, and Scoop and I were texting earlier. We're talking about doing a podcast about this together. He was unbelievable, and that's in line with how important Chicago is as a character in this film. As I was saying earlier about the key to that Farragut shoot, Chicago and the full circle of Chicago and that meeting with Coach Wolf Nelson, that meeting with Ronnie Fields, Scoop as part of that, and of course being in the 2008 press conference and that full circle connectivity. It's beautiful, and it speaks to the brotherhood of this game. That is, people are like, all right, high school AAU, we're brothers. This exists on the NBA level. It's just not highlighted and talked about enough. These bonds are unbelievable. So my long-winded tangent answer is many of those voices. And of course, the moment Doc Rivers sits down on the set, I know he's going to give us gold because that's what Doc does. So, yeah.
I hear you. No, it's spectacular because obviously I actually grew up in Southern California, and I was a big Laker fan during the era of the back-to-back and 10 and 11. Boy. So it's just
get your years right, Robert. 9 and 10. Damn, get your championship.
Oh, excuse me.
I want. So Robert, if you were going to the basket tonight, you might get Kurt Rambis. We got Celtics Lakers tonight. But yeah, and forgive me for butting in, but just let me say, obviously you were a kid back then. I'm 30, 31, 32. Like, how incredible was it seeing Celtics Lakers? Like, not just watching it on an NBA entertainment video, like I had to do as a kid, like you were doing up until that point, but like seeing it unfold, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that.
I hear you. And obviously, it must have been such an amazing experience to watch that, to watch the different eras of KG's life. I genuinely can only imagine. And like we talked about, there's so many stars in this new doc. One of them is Matt Barnes, who you worked with for obviously many years on All the Smoke. And I'm just wondering, transitioning to your All the Smoke career, what was it like getting involved with that project? There's so much content out there. There's, an unbelievable amount of sports media, and I'm wondering, how did you know what stood out about this show that you said this one is not going to just get lost in the wind of sports media? This stands out as a core podcast that will succeed for years to come.
Well, there's a lot of really meaningful backstory here. So I've played my role, right? And so much of it is karma, so much of it is timing, so much of it is just following your passions and instincts. So I'm grinding out. I was at Bleacher Report from 13 to 15 after Turner bought them. So I was leading NBA video on Team Stream, which was a tremendous opportunity for me to like have an industry job and build my name in basketball content. Because up until then, I was 2 years just straight hustling after leaving the basketball coaching side of things. And when I left there, I knew that I did not want to be in a studio-like environment again for a while. I knew I wanted to get into film, and that Lloyd Daniels film was a journey that started in 2012 that went to 2015, The Legend of Sweet Pea. But I, Brian Daly started at Showtime as their first like digital lead in sports. He was at ESPN for 14 years, and he started there. He went after the position. He got it. He wanted a new challenge. He knew sports business. He knew sports content. He knew partnerships. He knew digital. It was like this perfect meshing. And we started to talk about, okay, what can we do together as he grows and I grow? And, at first it was, hey, we've got these extras from the Allen Iverson doc. And actually it started with the Kobe doc. I was cutting extras for the Kobe doc. But the Kobe doc changed in the middle where all those complimentary voices and interviews were out, and it was Kobe doing the confessional with the camera. So everything I had cut there got left to the side. Then I do it with Iverson. Then there's, Victor Cruz, Tony Gonzalez do their docs. I'm doing it then. I'm getting into that ecosystem. And then, I come up with the DeMarcus Cousins idea for the Resurgence because I had done something with DeMarcus and his team a couple of years before, and I picked up the phone and obviously that didn't work out the way we had hoped, because 2 nights after his playoff debut, he crumples to the floor again and gets hurt, which was very upsetting for DeMarcus. And our film had just come out. But you think about that time period, we came out with the Resurgence. Brian brought Quiet Storm over from Bleacher Report, which was directed by another New York guy named Johnny Sweet, who's a terrific filmmaker. And all of a sudden, you're looking at this basketball library of Quiet Storm, The Resurgence, Shut Up and Dribble, One and Done, Iverson, Kobe. I'm forgetting something. And we're like, we got to create something around this. We knew what the basketball content demand was. More than just highlights, more than just quick analysis, more than just hot take stuff. And we went to work just thinking about what it could be, and credit Brian, because he's the one that had to go internal and sell it in. And at the same time, Stack's interview in Quiet Storm is awesome. Barnes, I interviewed him for The Resurgence. And all I simply did after that was say, hey, Matt, like, what do you want to do? He had all these ideas. He's out in Hollywood. He's meeting people all the time. He's such a great connector of the dots in terms of getting himself gigs and connecting with people to develop projects. So all I did was put Brian and Matt together. I called Brian after the interview. He's like, how was Matt Barnes? I'm like, he was unbelievable. I was driving to San Diego to interview Coach Mike Malone and Isaiah Thomas the next morning when Nuggets were playing the Lakers in a preseason game. And I said, take his number, call him. And they got to talking, and then this concept was born. And when Brian told me what it was going to be, and he had, he obviously wanted me in this role of helping him guide the platform because of the work we had been doing. And then he tells me the concept. I'm like, you got to be kidding. This is unbelievable. We knew it was going to be good. We couldn't have imagined how quickly it was going to grow. And that's a testament to the guys, to Matt and Stack. That's a testament to our production team, our production partner, Malka Media and Malka Sports. They made the commitment. They made the production commitment. They made the resource commitment. Obviously, Showtime made the commitment. And then we had to all figure out like how to drive this thing forward. But if Matt and Stack aren't Matt and Stack, if Matt and Stack don't have those incredible relationships and the trust from the guests, then there's no way this happens. But the trust, the vibe, the tone, obviously our society's acceptance now of cannabis and cannabis culture, meshing in with the basketball, the storytelling, the hip hop, the things that are going on in our world. They want to talk about some of the rough things going on in our world, specifically in the community of where they're from. Yes, let's do it. We need to shine a light on those things. It can't just be basketball all the time. It can't just be what happened in this game. It can't be about this matchup. It's got to be things that are important, human things. And some of those early episodes, like when Dwayne Wade's talking about his family, and we get major traction and pickup from non-sports platforms. And then we fortunately are able to sit down with Kobe Bryant, and we're able to sit down with KG, and those early episodes, this is all pre-pandemic stuff. That really set the tone. And then pandemic-wise, we were lucky enough where we know how to put together that right remote formula. Malka had technology that I had used before doing kind of live contributor hits back in the VR days. You mesh that together with Zoom. You add in the fact that the guys were home for 2-3 months and all they wanted to do is have those conversations. And then we were fortunate. We were able to grow the show during the pandemic. And from there, we've created a content ecosystem in 2 years that stems from social content to digital content to Best of All the Smoke on Showtime Network, and of course, KG right now on Showtime.
Absolutely. No, and I can only begin to explain this because as someone who wasn't lucky enough to live through certain spectacular eras of the NBA, this content is so special to this generation that we get to kind of get a feel for what the 80s, 90s, early 2000s before I really understood basketball were really like. So it's truly spectacular what you guys have done. And William, is there any other things you want to toss in?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, a documentary like this, like the Celtics, their last finals appearance before 2008 was like 1987, and then 2008. Yep, lost to the Lakers.
Yep.
Very long time ago.
I was 9 years old, and I remember what the enormity of it felt like, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you if I remember Magic's hook shot from watching the game or torturing myself watching it on NBA Entertainment 1,100 times. But I remember the enormity of it. And then, shortly after that, like, I remember like the end of Bird's career, like very, very vividly, because it was both exciting and hard to watch. And then obviously Reggie Lewis became my favorite player, and that to this day is incredibly painful. And that was actually, it's funny, I have this really unique connection with Jackie McMullen where, we had many conversations before we ever met. And in 2013, I wanted to do a Reggie Lewis film about being 30 years removed and the impact and the legacy he left. And Jackie was trying to help me. And one day, all of a sudden, she calls me, she says, "Eric, you're not going to believe this. Comcast called me. They've got all the footage, and their top producer, he's going to direct this Reggie Lewis doc. I'm really sorry." I'm like, oh. 3 years later, I'm like, how cool would it be to do like a retrospective on the 86 Celtics and get Bill Walton involved? And I'm talking to Jackie about it. A week later, "Eric, you're not going to believe this. The same Comcast group is doing a special with the Celtics on the 86 Celtics." So, it was, you guys obviously have, so much of your life and career in front of you, and not to be cliche-ish, but building on the anything is possible theme, but you got to go after it, and you got to keep going, and you got to keep throwing stuff up against the wall. And, I used so much of my 20s to figure out, I had great experiences, but at the end of the day, it was kind of like checking off the boxes, like, all right, these are the things I want to experience, but these experiences are teaching me that I don't necessarily want to do this for the long term. And I always wanted to be creative, but at the same time, I was super competitive. And I had so many mentors in my life in sports, and I was, very much about paying it forward and karma and all these things. So that was me every day in basketball, and trying to think about living without that. And like, I was telling this to someone last week, I could have the worst day in the world as a teacher and a coach, but look myself in the mirror and know I helped at least one young person today, if not dozens or more, right? In this industry, that's been a void a bit, but I do teach almost every day, because I'm either working with my All the Smoke production crew, or I'm working with the crew on the film, or we have a Showtime internal crew that works under Brian, and I'm always just throwing stuff at them. So it's just different, it's just different. But the fact that all of this has aligned in this way is still pretty surreal. But I would say to you guys, like, this technology, this industry did not exist in this way when I was coming out of school. So you guys have these tools, you have this know-how. At the same time, you've got more people competing to do it, with more platforms creating a demand for the content. So we're in a really interesting time right now. But the platform, who I get to work with, what's considered work, it's pretty special. And I'll leave you with this, and it's all about your perspective. So during the pandemic, I found myself, I moved to LA in February of 2021 this year. Spent 18 years in Manhattan. Grew up in Nassau County. Went to Ithaca College upstate. So like I'm a hardcore New Yorker, despite being a Celtics fan. Yeah. And during the pandemic, I found myself asking myself, I'm doing the dream show and the dream film at the same time. Why do I have to do it during a pandemic? Because the environment we created around All the Smoke, Showtime Basketball, how the early KG shoots felt, that's everything I ever wanted in terms of being around a community of people in person. And then it was all taken away from all of us. But at the same time, it's all about mindset. And I do a gratitude exercise every morning, which is something I should have started when I was your age, but thankfully I started it a couple of years ago. How lucky am I that I had these things to work on during such a crazy time where I literally think I would have lost my mind. I really do. And it was the discipline of sports. It was taking myself back to Belmore JFK basketball practice And we happened to be conference champs in 1996. I'm still really close with my coach and my guys. And it was literally the discipline of one more sprint, one more suicide, one more defensive slide drill. Get on the ground in the apartment and do 300 crunches and 200 push-ups. Like, it was that mentality in the pandemic, and then go back to work. So fortunate that we were able to keep this going on both lanes during this time. And now we've come out on the other side. We've got season 3 of All the Smoke underway. The team was filming in New York when I was just there. Those episodes will be dropping soon. Season 2 of All the Smoke, best of, is on demand right now. So Iverson, KG, Steph Curry dropped last night. Shaq drops next week. There's going to be 15 of those. And, and then the film is out, and, what we're building with KG on the digital front, stay tuned for that coming in 2022. So it's great to be a part of. It's great to help lead it, but it's also important to share this stuff with you guys, because you guys are the next generation, and we've got to play a role in that too. So appreciate you guys having me on, and anytime you want to wrap sports or hear my long-winded stories about basketball and filmmaking, you let me know.
No, we will definitely have to contact you soon, because I really enjoyed this time. Thank you so much for taking this time on this Friday evening. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Hey, have a great Thanksgiving, guys, and don't forget, anything is possible. Showtime.